Hi, guys. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Of,
Yeah, thank you.
of course. When did you guys start filming?
We started filming June of 2019. It was
Yep.
literally 3 days after I graduated high school. We started on the 29th.
I think so. And then we started filming in New Jersey, and then we went to Pennsylvania and the Poconos to shoot, and then we went back to Jersey, and it was a really quick shoot. So we didn't have a lot of time for error, which was, is stressful, but it was a lot of fun. We had a blast.
We created something really special.
Yeah.
Definitely. And you guys, I was going to ask if you guys did it before COVID or after COVID, but you guys did it before.
Before COVID. Thank goodness.
Yeah. But we did have to do editing, all of that stuff over FaceTime and Zoom, and we were all in different places. So, that was a bit difficult, and it kind of slowed us down a little bit, but we did get it done. And we're super proud of it.
Yeah, so, COVID definitely didn't leave us untouched.
Right. So how long did the whole process take? So you guys started filming, but then editing and then post and then everything like that. How long did that take?
We started writing it in 2017 in our junior year of high school. And then we started filming in 2019. And then we got final locked picture actually on my birthday this year. So that was May 4th, 2021.
Yeah.
So it's been a long process.
Yeah, lots of different cuts too, because we had a bunch of rough cuts before this. So we were really just refining it, getting the music rights, all of that fun stuff. And, since, we are an indie movie, it does take us a little bit longer than, the big studios where they have, thousands of people working on one production. Where we had a really small team, but honestly, it was amazing because, we all put our heart into it. And we're just so proud of what came out of it. And, it's really exciting.
And that's the passion is basically what makes the whole project to come together. So that's really amazing. And I was reading that you guys both met on a Law and Order scene.
Yeah. We did an episode of Law and Order back in 2015. And that was when we met. And it was the Duggar spinoff, or not spinoff, Duggar inspired episode.
But it's not officially Duggar inspired, but
wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And we got to play sisters, and that was super cool.
So how did the conversation happen when you guys were like, you know what, we should co-write a film together? How'd that conversation go?
Well, my dad is a writer and a director, and he was having a conversation with an executive one day about being Generation X and how that fits into the current political climate back in 2016. And they were just kind of talking about what's their culpability in it. And my dad talked about this high school assignment that he had when he was in junior year, and it was about the generational theory, and that there are 4 generations, there are 4 seasons. And this executive was like, it'd be really cool if you could make a movie about that. And then I was like, how do you make a movie about that? And so he was kind of thinking about it. He's like, I don't want to write this movie, because if I write this movie, it's going to be about some angsty boy in the 90s. We've all seen that movie before. And, I'm his daughter, and I'm interested in filmmaking, and he knows that it's so much harder for women to make it in this field. And so he one day was pitching the story of Liz and Stacy, our 2 characters, to us. And he was like, and I think your friend Bridget should play Stacy. And by that point, we had been friends for 2 years. And I was like, yes, I need Bridget to do this with me. And so, then we pitched it to you and your dad. And
it was over lunch, Kevin, we were all eating, and Kevin was just sitting there, his food untouched. And he was just, laying it down, being like, I want you guys to write this. And we did, which is really crazy. And what we did, because we were still in high school, and obviously you have school during the day, you have homework and all of that fun stuff, is that we would have sleepovers at each other's houses, at Tori's apartment, at my house in Jersey. So it was a lot of back and forth between Brooklyn for us. And we would write it at our sleepovers. And it's kind of funny because you would think a normal sleepover, oh yeah, we're all painting our nails and watching movies, but no, we were actually writing a movie, which
And
was
sometimes painting our nails.
yes, and making scones and that fun stuff. But yeah, and it was really crazy for us because this is our first time really writing something. This is our first feature, and we're young. And I think that honestly gave us an advantage a little bit because we didn't have any like preconceived notions of, at this page you need to have this happen, and at this page you need to have this happen. It was really very organic for us. And in as actors as well, we would improv some of the scenes and then we would write it down, which was so fun. And that, I feel like our writing process was super unique and something that's really special, and it's part of what makes the movie so special.
It's also like we came into it with a viewpoint that isn't traditionally seen in a lot of like movies that are looking back on the time, because neither of us lived in the 90s. So it allowed us to create a bit of separation from ourselves and what was actually happening in our teenage lives at the time. But also we could really bring that like true energy of like teenage interaction and what it's like to be unsupervised in a house with a bunch of kids, and bring something kind of unpretentious and uncynical to it that I think a lot of media that adults make about being a teenager has.
And you know what I liked and admired the most was that the whole film isn't told from the eyes of parents or anything like that. It's told strictly from the youth. Like, it's shown from their perspective and the things and challenges that they go through. And I was like, no, this is really good because the message is coming across.
Thank you.
That's so nice to hear. Because I think one thing that we were also kind of frustrated about is in, a lot of media, especially when it comes to teen girls, they're not accurately represented, which is frustrating because, we would get the auditions, read the sides, and I'm like, I would never act like that. My friends and I would never act like that because this just doesn't seem real, because it's someone who's older writing about people who are younger when they don't really know what that's like anymore, because, they're looking back on it. And, that's something that we also carry through, is like, we want to show accurate representation, for our generation, as well as, just being a teenager. And, there's a lot of things that you forget when you get older, but we were living it. We were living that age experience. So, there's a lot of the little things in there that, adults forget, and then they watch it and they're like, oh, I remember. Yeah, we used to talk about this, or, oh yeah, I would get upset over the stupidest things. And like, it's a big deal at the time because, that's your whole life.
Stakes feel very high when you're a teenager.
Absolutely. And I feel like the portrayal was like correct, because sometimes, how you mentioned, when it's older folks trying to portray younger people, they just try to dim down the problems or just like dilute it with problems that aren't on my mind every day. I'm not worried about boys or who I like. I'm worried about, okay, where am I going to go in 20 years? Like, these are the problems that's going through my mind. And so when they were talking about college, I'm like, yes, that's exactly an issue that I had when I was in high school. All I thought about was, what college? What can I write on my essay? What's going to make me stand out from all the other people applying?
I think something that happens so often, and especially to teenage girls, but to any teenager, is that adults forget that when you're a teenager, oftentimes the things that are happening to you are the best things and the worst things that have ever happened to you, because you're only 16. So it's easy when you're an adult to be like, but this is frivolous. Like, it is. But when you're a teenager, it doesn't feel like that, because it's truly the worst thing that has ever happened to you. You're only 16.
Right.
Liz losing her brother is truly the worst thing that has ever happened to her. And it might be for the rest of her life. But among that is what happened between her and Stacy when they were in 7th grade. Like, she still holds on to that really strongly because she's only 16. And I think a lot of times when adults make things about teens, they have that perspective in their head, because they know, what happened with my friend in middle school actually isn't that big of a deal. Yeah. But God, when you're 14, 16, it feels like the end of the world. And we really wanted, Liz feels like her world is ending. you know, she is such a buzzkill in every scene because her world is ending.
Right.
And we wanted to bring that level of stakes to it, but also like the realism of like, but your world isn't ending. You're just 16.
Right. This is all you know. These are like the biggest problems
right
right now.
And for Stacy, it's the fear of not being accepted. And, you know, that for me was a huge problem in middle school. And I really connected with Stacy on that. And I put a lot of my personal experiences in some ways into Stacy because, you know, I was a nerd and that was a big deal back then, but now it's cool for some reason. I'm kind of mad about that because I was like, you know, in middle school when being a nerd was cool, but you know, I would go to Comic-Con every year. I would wear my like Thor t-shirts to school, and you know, I would get bullied so much because of it. And you know, I felt like, oh my gosh, I completely have to change who I am. So everyone at my school was wearing Vineyard Vines. I hated Vineyard Vines, but that was the only thing I would wear for 2 years because I'm like, if I wear this, I will be cool and people will like me. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you get to a point where you're like, I'm not happy. I'm not happy being somebody that I'm not. And that's something that Stacy comes to realize is because she's not this persona that she created for herself because, you know, she's covering up who she is, and that's hurting her more than, you know, it's making her happy being accepted by people who, you know what, you shouldn't even care if you're accepted by those kinds of people because you wouldn't want to be friends with them anyway. And that's a big lesson that Stacy learns, and that was a big lesson that I learned eventually. It took me a while, but yeah, that's, you know, it's the smallest things now that, you know, are huge back then. You're totally right.
Definitely. And the film focuses heavily on LGBTQ plus youth. And basically my question is, what message were you trying to get across to the viewer?
I think for me, so I'm queer, and something that's really frustrating for me is that so much representation for women, especially queer women, is so sexualized. And there's so much emphasis placed on the relationships that they're in, the sex that they're having, the way that they look. And you know, when I was 16 and desperate for bisexual representation, so little of it was actually aimed at me, whether it was aimed at older women or aimed at men or aimed at whatever. I felt so left behind by it all. And I wanted to see something that was very grounded in it and wasn't about like, I think Liz's sexuality in the movie, you know, we had to stick with like what was truthful for the 90s. So she has been outed. But what's hard for Liz is that she lacks something that I had access to, which was internet and words. Liz is bisexual, but doesn't have the words to describe it. Right? So Liz the Les, all of those things, like she can't articulate her identity to people, but there's also nobody who wants to listen to it or care about it. And I just wanted to put as many of my truthful experiences into the film of being at Truth or Dare and having people be like, okay, but like, what are you? You know, but actually, like, and all of those moments. And so I think a little bit of the message was taking your time and figuring yourself out and knowing that like your sexuality is for you. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's hard for Liz, is that like her sexuality hasn't been able to be for her, and it's been like bannered across the school. And then, you know, in opposition to her, you have Ryan, who, you know, he says like, I'm no longer accepting gay as an insult, like, who is trying to own it and totally does. But I think that's kind of the message of like, it's for you. It's not for anyone else to consume or to see. It's right. About you.
And what I also love about our film is that it's not just a coming out story, because there's so many, a lot of the representation like Tori was saying, and especially for teens who, you know, are part of the LGBTQ community, is always, oh, this is a coming out movie.
Mm-hmm.
And those are great. Like, we definitely need those, but it kind of feels like that's the only thing available. And, you know, it never really shows, you know, that, oh, being gay doesn't have to be like your only personality trait. I feel like that's kind of the way that, you know, some mainstream media is kind of making it seem as like, you know, but those movies are great and all, but there's nothing that really, you know, shows how, you know, your identity and like your sexuality can be really integrated into, you know, a story where it still has purpose and it still really matters. It's not just like sprinkled in there as like, oh, you're the token, whatever.
It's not an afterthought.
Right. It's not an afterthought, but it shows that people who are in the community still have lives and they still have other issues too. And, you know, that's really important to them as well.
Definitely. And I have a lot of friends who are part of the community, and I tell all of them, like, you know, I'm 100% an ally. And there's times like where they tell me like their struggles and like the insults they've been given. And it's just like, it's one thing for me to get mad at them, but it's like not mad at them, but mad at the people who are insulting them. But it's another thing to like physically live this. Like, this is your life. Like, these insults come to you every day. Like, the not being accepted, this is your reality. And it's, you know, I try to be as supportive as I can all the time, but at the same time they tell me like, you know, you're not living this. And right. I'm like, you know, all I can really do is just be there for you 100%.
Right. And like movies, film, television, and theater, these are practices in empathy, right? Which is why it sucks that so many leads in movies are cis het white men, because people are only ever practicing empathy with cishet white men, and so cishet white men rarely have to practice empathy for other people, right? But like, one of the goals of the movie is to give you these queer characters, and you have to empathize with them, but not just over the fact that they're gay, not just over the fact that Liz's brother died, but just through every moment in their life. And again, like, yeah, see that they're real people and they have dimensions, and it does affect them because it's intrinsically part of their personality. But I also wouldn't say that Liz being bisexual is the main plot point in the movie.
Right.
It's not, but it does affect her life.
Right.
I'm bisexual. It affects my life daily, but it's also like not the most pertinent thing in my life 24/7, you know? And I definitely don't face a ton of like harassment because I'm not incredibly visibly queer, I think, a lot of the time, but it's definitely like the way that you carry yourself in public spaces are different. Like, you know, it affects you. Every bit of your identity affects you all the time. And that's true of every aspect of anyone's identity.
And I feel like society makes it such a big deal to know what everybody's sexual orientation is, but it's literally nobody's business.
Yeah, it's just your business, you know?
It's just how you feel. That's it, you know? But I think what's great about Gen Z is that I feel like it's not as big of a deal, or like, oh my God, like, you're gay? That's crazy. Like, tell me about it. You know, it's really become normalized with our generation, which is something that, you know, I'm so grateful for, because, you know, I feel, although there are certain, you know, areas or, you know, people have issues with parents, you know, that, you know, it might not be as, you know, easy for them. But I feel like, you know, for our generation, we're really making a lot of great strides to, you know, making it just more normal instead of something that's like an abnormality and like something that's so crazy. Because
right, Liz and Ryan are the two gay people at their high school. Whereas, right. I mean, I went to performing arts school, so it's a little bit different, but like, I have very few straight friends. And like, it's not on purpose.
Right. But that's completely fine. You know?
Yeah.
One of the scenes I want to talk about is when Stacy and Liz were both in the bed after the whole meltdown at the hot tub. And basically, Liz looks at Stacy and says, if I could, you know, go back, I would wait till after high school to come out. And I think you should do the same. And I was looking at that scene because I was just like, this is a conversation that most people have. Like, when is the right time to come out? And I think that portrayed it perfectly, because you have one person who's out to the whole school, but then you have another person who's hiding and trying to put on a perception. So it's just like, what was like the imagery that you were trying to go for that entire scene?
I think part of it, I think something that was difficult for me was writing a movie that takes place in the 90s, and the way that I want to talk about being queer wasn't the truth of what was true at the time. But I think part of that scene is that we have to understand where Liz is personally coming from. And I don't know if Liz is right in what she was saying, but what Liz was saying was like true to how she felt about it, which is being out in high school sucked. It sucked. It made her life hell. And because ultimately at the end of the day, Liz cares for Stacy, she doesn't want Stacy to go through the same thing, which is surprisingly mature of Liz, who, you know, throughout the whole film is not very mature about a lot of things. But I mean, was she right to say that? Who knows? You know, you're coming out is you're coming out, and you get to decide when you do it. But
yeah, it also reflects the times as well. You know, I think if Generation Rex were to take place today, that conversation probably wouldn't need to happen because, like I said before, it's not as big of a deal to our generation. And I mean, I haven't, you know, personally, you know, seen any like super like seen any people like be super derogatory to, you know, their peers, you know, just because of their sexuality. Like it's very normalized, even though, you know, you even if you live in different areas, I feel like. But I think it really is a reflection of, you know, what was going on in the 90s, you know, for, you know, gay people. Like the AIDS crisis just happened. I know a lot of, you know, it was very tough.
don't ask, don't tell.
Yep. All of that. And, you know, marriage still wasn't legal. So it is a lot scarier, you know, at that point. And I'm so thankful that today that is becoming less and less of a reality for people in the community, because it's so much easier for people to, you know, open up and say, hey, you know, I'm gay, but who cares, you know, because I just want to tell you because you're my friend. And people don't need to really publicly come out anymore, I feel like, in such a like huge way, because it's become more normalized. But, you know, thankfully we've made we've made it a long way. But yeah, it's just in the 90s, you know, it was tough. And, you know, I feel like it's a bigger decision then than it is now because of all of the public scrutiny that was going on at the time.
And my last few questions, I know we mentioned earlier how you guys started writing this film at a very young age. So what would your advice be to those who have a passion in something but don't know how to go about it, or they're scared because they don't see how far it can go?
I think honestly just taking that leap of faith and really just going for it, because, you know, when you're young, who cares? You have the time to explore. And that's, you know, something that I'm so grateful that I was given the opportunity to explore that side of myself, because now I'm going to film school to learn how to be a producer and still, you know, acting and auditioning instead of just going to school for acting. Yeah. And I never would have done that if it hadn't been for this movie. And, you know, I'm so grateful that we were able to fully explore, you know, this totally new side of ourselves. And I think that, you know, if you are young and, you know, you're passionate about filmmaking, or you're passionate about something else and you don't really know how to go about it, ask for help. Say, hey, like, who wants to do this with me? Or is anybody else, find other people who are passionate about the same thing that you are, because you'll go a lot further with them working at your side than just by yourself. Because honestly, supporting each other and bringing each other to the top is so going to the top by yourself.
I want to completely like just echo what Bridget said. Hard retweet right there. But also, I mean, sucking at something is the first step at being really good at something. That's a quote from Adventure Time, I know, but it's true. You know, like I'm working on my second screenplay right now, and just being like, man, I'm so much better now than I was then. And just on a level, like I'm I'm able to cut things. I had such a hard time parting with things the first draft, and now I look at a scene, I'm like, man, I love this scene, but it needs to go, like you just got to do your first try. And it is more beneficial to create 5 bad scripts or just to keep making scripts than it is to try to just perfect one, which I know is real rich coming from 2 girls who got their first screenplay made. But like, you want to just keep trying at it, and that will make you better.
Last question. So the film's been selected for the Dances with the Film Festival in Los Angeles. How did you guys find out the news? And like, what was your reaction when you heard the news?
So my dad, because he was executive producer on the film, and I'm so happy that we both have parents. I'm just gonna go on a side tangent here, that we both have parents that are so supportive of us having a career in the arts, because I know so many kids don't have that, and I wish everyone did. But we couldn't
have done this without our father's love.
Yeah,
both of us,
definitely,
and our moms.
And our moms. Yes, my mom was helping a lot with the editing process. I can't even tell you how many times she's watched the movie. It's crazy. I think she's watched it more than anyone, even Phil, who is our editor. I kid you. But yeah, he got an email because he did all the submissions on Film Freeway. And at first he got an email saying, oh, like, you're a finalist to be selected. And we're like, oh, wow, okay. Like, this is interesting. And then we got the email that we got in, and, my dad told me, and we were all like celebrating, and it was so exciting. And then, Tori and Kevin found out, and my parents had, some bubbly, but
I was home alone with my blind dog that you can hear bumbling around in the back. My dad was in LA at the time, and my brother was shooting something in Italy with my mom. So I was literally in the house alone, and I get a text from my dad, and he's like, we got into like Dances with Films. And I was just like, oh, wow. But I was just sitting in my apartment alone, and so, like 20 minutes later, I get a call from my parents, and not that I wasn't excited, but it's weird when like really exciting things happen and you're just like by yourself and you receive it over text, and you're kind of like, this doesn't feel real. And my brother and my mom and my dad, we all like hop on FaceTime. The time zones magically coincided, and my brother was like, okay, what's more exciting, this or the night before I was part of this like local election for city council in my area, and my council member who I was volunteering for, she won. And, it was like 50 people in a room screaming. And I hadn't been in a room with that many people since pre-COVID. So I was like, well, Shahana winning last night was pretty exciting. And my mom was like, this is more exciting, Victoria. This is more exciting. And I was like, I know this is more exciting, but it doesn't feel like it yet. Like it hasn't sunk in. But then it really started to sink in. I think it was like a week later, you and I FaceTimed because I went out to LA for the orientation, and I like kind of lost my mind a little bit. I was like, oh no, it's like happened. Like I had a very delayed reaction, and now I'm like losing my mind about it constantly.
This is such an amazing opportunity for you guys. And this film is definitely going to speak volumes for a lot of people. And
I hope so.
It definitely will, because it spoke volumes to me. It's going to be a very much of an eye-opening movie for a lot of people, and I think you guys did an amazing job with it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That means so much. It really does.
And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today, sitting down with me, talking, and I wish you guys the best of luck at the film festival.
Thank you so much. It's been such a joy.
Thank you. And thank you so much for, taking the time and for having us. This was a lot of fun. So thank you.
Of course. And we'll definitely have to do it again, because I feel like another film is coming soon.
Fingers crossed.